young women seem to be completely terrified of marriage, as far as I can tell from the stats that I've seen and from some of the videos that tend to get shared about online, specifically on Twitter. I'm still not calling it X. You can try and say whatever you want, Elon. It's Twitter. It's not X. I'm not going to X something. I'm going to tweet something.
Mm.
And
That's how we came to love it.
there you go. Exactly. It's a load of birds tweeting at one another, and nobody's really actually listening to anything at all. And also on TikTok, videos always get shared about of women giving terrible marriage advice from generally from porn stars, which I don't know why you would take marriage advice from a porn star, but some people do. And also from obviously single women who seem to just be either afraid of commitment altogether or afraid, as we'll find out, for some reason that if you just get married, all of a sudden you have to start doing housework because you don't before you get married.
No.
Before you're in a relationship, everybody knows that everything just cleans itself up magically. That's how it worked when I was in university. I think when I was staying in university accommodation, I found everything would just clean itself up magically. There definitely wasn't, a stench in most people's university.
It would just go away. You would wish it away.
That's what happens. Thank you. I'm glad it wasn't just me who found this magical thing happening.
Yeah, it's only in marriage that life gets monotonous, never outside of marriage.
Absolutely. Ever. And also people seem to forget that two people can't share a burden. It always has to just go entirely on one person. Now, I'm going to preface this and say that what I'm not going to be saying throughout this segment is that all marriage is going to be a fairy tale ending for people's lives. You don't just get married and then everything is perfect. You don't get married and then all hardship in life is going to go. You might get married, and if we're perfectly honest, even if you're in a relationship, you'll know this, some things might get more difficult because all of a sudden you do have to have a shared emotional responsibility with somebody and also shared practical responsibilities with somebody that create their own difficulties that you might not experience when you're single. So you can't just say that marriage is some kind of cure-all for any problem that you might experience in your life. But on a society-wide basis, as well as for individuals, marriage is obviously a good thing. If you want a strong, cohesive society built up of what I consider to be the base unit of any civilization, which is the family, in an Aristotelian sense, as you would put, then you need people to get married and you need people to be unafraid of getting married. And what you don't need are spinster harpies, to put it in a very blunt term, online telling people that if you get married, the only thing that's going to happen is you're going to be married to Homer Simpson and he's just going to be sat around on his arse all day, doing nothing, eating and getting fat while you do all of the main work. That's not what's going to happen, and we need to be honest about both sides of this. So before I go into any further detail, we've got lots of videos on the website, as always. We've got lots of articles on the website, and recently Calvin came into the studio to do a podcast with me and Carl. And afterwards, Carl did an interview specifically with him, where they were talking about society, as we're discussing right now. And he was also talking about issues of faith, issues of atheism, and issues that are facing the country. I believe this one is free on the website. So if you don't want to have to shill out for a membership right now, although you should, because it's only a $5. It's only a $5. You've got a $5 probably in your back pocket right now. I know you've got a $5 on your credit card and on your debit card. So, just throw something a little bit our way. Just, contribute to the family a little bit. I won't give you what's yours. You get what's ours. You get what's coming to you. Okay? So there you go. Capiche? But if you want to test it out first and see what great videos we've got on here, then you can watch this and see the interview that Carl had with Calvin, which I'm sure is very illuminating. So let's carry on, shall we? So there is the starting decline in marriage rates that have been going on ever since, you would say, maybe the second wave feminism. Was that maybe in the late 60s, early 1970s that a lot of people attribute that to? Where you can see from this article here from care.org, where they're talking about marriage rates. Since 1972, a lot of these figures are, and I believe that they are taken from the UK specifically. The marriage rate per 1,000 of the population has fallen from 80 to 20.1 by 2018. So that is a vast, vast reduction. That has fallen by 4 times?
Yeah.
That's absolutely ridiculous. For women, since 1972, the marriage rate per 1,000 of the population has fallen from 63.5 to 18.6 by 2018. And in 2018, in England and Wales, 270,000 marriages took place, which you can compare with 480,285 in 1972. So almost half It's almost completely halved as an overall figure. And for the actual individual rates between men and women, it has fallen drastically. It's sometimes by a factor of 4. That's absolutely ridiculous. And once again, the statement I'm making here is not that every marriage is going to be created equal and that it's going to fix every problem in your life. Just that if you want to live a stable life that's going to have some kind of meaning, you're going to want to share that with people. If you want to have meaningful experiences and some kind of contentment in your life, you want somebody to share those experiences with. You can obviously get that from close friends, but at the end of the day, most people will find that sort of life within a stable relationship, which ends in marriage and children. So I don't see these sorts of figures and think, women's empowerment finally worked. We finally got there. No, I look at this and see the civilization that I live within is crumbling.
No, these are not good figures. And it means that, meaningful relationships are declining in number. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I think you're right that women are only hearing one narrative now, this newer narrative, which is telling you to delay it as long as possible and to spend that time focusing on yourself and, pursuing your own self-actualization and self-discovery. But yeah, I think, if you buy into that for a really long time, there's obviously benefits to figuring out who you are and pursuing your dreams. But at some point, you're going to want to share something more meaningful with someone. And I think, women are missing that narrative because we've got all of the kind of Instagram feminist advice is that marriage is monotonous and you're going to get trapped doing all of the chores and the housework and it's going to take away from your personal growth and development. But you've also got a therapy culture that's telling young women to focus on themselves, to, heal themselves and be the perfect person before they meet someone and find someone perfect for them. And I think it's sad because I do think young women are being deterred from something meaningful and just pushed towards pursuing kind of short, shallow relationships instead.
Well, that attainment of perfection is something that's never going to come in the first place.
Yeah.
Nobody's ever going to be perfect. Nobody's ever going to be completely content with their own lives, no matter what you're doing. You could be working the most empowering girl boss job ever.
Yeah.
You could be earning 7 figures a year. And there's still going to be parts of your life that you're not entirely content with.
Yeah.
And there's a further issue of when we talk about empowerment, there's a question, what do you empower someone to do? Do you empower people to pursue a career as opposed to, pursuing a family?
Yeah.
That's what it seems to me to be.
And I think it's the same with men because I think a lot of men are hearing this narrative of you need to be like a alpha male, like a lone alpha boss, and you don't take on any woman if she's going to bring any kind of discomfort to your life or sacrifice. And then women are hearing they need to be this kind of self-actualized girl boss who doesn't need a man. So I think it's both genders are hearing that they need to go off on their own and find themselves endlessly. I don't know if that will make us
propensity towards careerism.
Yeah, and
and
your own individual desires and aspirations, which obviously there's value in that, but I don't think it's making us happy on the whole.
No, I certainly wouldn't say so, especially with women. I would say something that we'll get to at the end is there's the obvious problem of the women's happiness paradox, which people always bring up, which is that men's happiness has dropped a little bit, but women's happiness since the 1970s, the early 70s, has dropped drastically to the point where I believe before women were on average self-reporting as being happier than men. Whereas now it's well more the case that men are self-reporting as happier than women because men, for all of our faults, can just kind of get on with things because that's what we're programmed to do. Women, when they don't take on the more nurturing roles within their own lives that are programmed into them, will end up still with those instincts. They just won't have a proper outlet for them. There's the problem that a lot of people point out, and that I've seen a lot of, the 40, 50-year-old single woman, no children, who has a baby surrogate, which is how you end up with the phenomenon of the crazy cat ladies.
Yeah.
I love cats. My parents have cats. I grew up around them. They're lovely creatures, and they can be an excellent add-on to any family. But they're not a replacement.
I have 3 cats, and they can give me perfect advice. But I have a sense that you have to show us some.
Was that a nice little pun you put in there? Perfect. Very clever.
I have a feeling that you are about to talk to us about someone who isn't so much qualified to give advice.
No. Have either of you ever heard of Mia Khalifa?
Yeah.
How familiar are you with her work, Stelios?
I mean, I've just heard that she had an Oxford Union address, and she went with bimbo nails.
Oxford Union address.
Yeah.
They'll give that to bloody anyone these days, won't they? Dear God. So if you're not familiar, and I don't blame you if you're not, Mia Khalifa is an ex porn star now? I think.
Yeah, I thought she stopped. Although she went back or something.
I remember there was a big controversy a few years ago where she basically made it sound as though she was forced into the industry and was abused in the industry. But then she's gone back and done an OnlyFans, and a lot of the things that she was saying are very contentious, and people weren't entirely sure how much they could trust her. She, being the most qualified, having been married twice and engaged 3 times, decided that as an ex-porn star with a string of failed marriages, it's my turn to give out some advice on TikTok after this person said to her in a comment, this Nikki Jones comment, facts, married at 80, divorced at 20. So let's see what Mia had to say on the subject, shall we?
Oh, we're comparing stats. Baby girl doesn't know that I am Tom Brady at this game. Married at 18, divorced at 21. Second marriage, married at 25, divorced at 28. Third engagement, engaged at 29, ended it at 30, but I kept the ring. I'm still keeping Tom Brady on his toes. We should not be afraid to leave these men. We are not stuck with these people. Marriage is not a sanctimonious thing. It is paperwork. It's something, it's a commitment you make to someone. But if you feel like you're not getting anything from that commitment and you're trying, you gotta go. You gotta go. You have to go. I know it's difficult to fill out paperwork and to make appointments and to do all of these things, but this is your fucking life. Do you want to be stuck with someone? Period. Do you want to be stuck with?
Insightful. Highly, highly insightful. So would either of you take her advice after she prefaces it, all of her advice that she's about to give with, by the way, I've got a number of failed marriages. By the way, did I mention I'm a former porn star? Here's my advice, which is basically, if you get bored, you should leave. That's all marriage was to her at the end of it, is paperwork. At the end of the day, it's not something meaningful that you've built up there. You're going to try and develop a life together.
Well, yeah, if you go into it thinking it's paperwork, then it's not gonna work, because you have to go into it thinking it's going to be full of rough patches and sacrifice and compromise. So having that mindset in the beginning is not conducive to a happy marriage.
I think it's not, but this is a case where, you have a messenger. Anything she's going to say, people are going to disagree.
Yeah.
So I disagree with her on the idea that marriage is not a sanctimonious thing, because it's the basic relationship, arguably.
Oh, yes.
Talk about socially speaking. And marriage has a link to the family, and you have people within the family. The relationships that occur within the family are the basic relationship.
Yeah.
But there's something that she says that I think, if we abstract the fact that she's saying it, has some merit in it. And this is that, you don't owe unconditional.
Yes.
No, I agree with that.
Yeah, I agree.
So if you marry someone and eventually you find that they're a horrible person, yes, of course, it is a sanctimonious thing, but you should leave because it is a sanctimonious thing.
Yeah.
And the other person is not honoring it.
Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't say that you should leave immediately, but obviously you need to put effort in. You need to put effort in on both sides. And if somebody's not pulling their weight in a relationship, you should speak to them about it.
I think you need to put effort into giving the benefit of the doubt to the other person to see whether they're horrible. But once you understand that they're horrible, then I think you should leave ASAP.
This is true. You could also put it down to poor judgment on her side with the people that she was going with for marriage in the first place. After a certain amount of marriages failing, you've got to wonder, am I the problem? Potentially, I will say this. But yes, you have to put effort in on both ends. And yes, that's all I really want to say about Mia Khalifa. Let's get her face off of the screen, shall we? Just as a bit of advice for anybody out there. If you're getting advice from someone, maybe consider who you're getting the advice from. And that will actually depend, that will actually show you what the advice is directing more than the advice itself. If you understand what I'm saying there, I put that slightly poorly, but basically, sometimes advice can say more about the person giving it than the quality of the advice itself. So this is something else that I saw going around, which was this TikTok of this girl who's being presented with an engagement ring, and as she's going to accept it, all she's seeing is visions of herself in the future doing all of these basic menial bits of housework that I assume she has to do anyway.
Sorry, she seems like Gollum trying to put his hand on the one ring. Yeah.
So this is showing that obviously to her, the idea of a marriage is none of the positives that can come with a good relationship. Presumably, if she's being presented an engagement ring, she's already been with the person presenting it in the first place for long enough that he's decided to try and get married to her. And she's just assuming that as soon as that ring goes on, any benefits that she gets from it, material or otherwise, are just going to go out the window. And she's essentially going to be free house labor for him. And I can understand that worry.
But I think it's sad that, why do young women view marriage that way? Who has taught them, or what have they seen growing up that they think that this is what all marriages are? It's sad. Like, I feel sorry for her.
They not have their own parents to refer to when they look into look at these situations.
Well, maybe not, because a lot of young people today have divorced parents. They don't come from stable facts. Maybe this is their vision of what a partnership between a mother and father or a husband and wife is like, because they haven't seen it. All they've known from it is the narrative they're being told, which is usually, delay it and avoid it because you'll end up in this situation.
Perhaps. I worry when I see this that some men will watch this and decide to tailor their own behavior and their own relationship expectations to go in the complete opposite direction to this. Oh, okay, women are afraid that if we get married and if I get in a relationship with her, then I'm just going to be this weird domineering figure in her life, essentially going to turn her, once again, into unpaid house laborer.
Yeah.
So in that case, I'm going to become as submissive as possible to try and tailor my own behavior to what I think women want.
Yeah.
And from my experiences seeing people put themselves in that situation, one, it's very damaging for the men in general because they end up seeing themselves as pathetic. And you end up with, Callum's been covering it a lot recently. I don't know if either of you know about the iDubbbz situation. Are you aware of that? So he has a very clearly domineering wife to the point where he took her surname, which is not something that you typically see. And he is basically being ritually humiliated by her on a daily basis on social media. And she is the one who's in charge of a lot of the projects that they undertake together. But whenever anything goes wrong with them, like for instance, they put on Creator Clash 2, which in the build-up he had been constantly saying, she's the one in charge of all of the management and organization, making sure that people work together. It fails, makes no money. They lose 250 grand on it. He's the one going out in front of the camera, apologizing and explaining it, and she's nowhere to be seen. So he's been turned into a ritual humiliation beating stick on her behalf. And I can't imagine that she would find that particularly attractive after a while. So if you make yourself too submissive in response to videos like this as a man, you're going to end up turning yourself into someone that women aren't going to be attracted to in the first place.
Yeah, you can't win either way, I suppose.
Yes.
Like, men are going to think, that's the sad truth, is that if you do make yourself submissive and you do everything that you think a woman wants you to do, she might not find you attractive anymore. There might be part of that dynamic might need to have some level of dominance from the man. So yeah, I do feel sorry for men. What do they take from this? How do they approach marriage and get the balance right?
Yeah, don't let her cut off your balls and put them on the mantelpiece, is what I'm saying here. And also, I shared this out, pointed out the obvious. You still have to do all of these things, perhaps even get pregnant and have a baby.
Yeah.
But on your own. You still have to do housework. And I got a load of people who were the sorts of people who had cat mum, no minors allowed, and other such things on their Twitter bios saying like, well, yeah, exactly, but that's the point. Don't you understand that if you get married, all of a sudden the workload that you have to do at home quadruples? I don't believe you. It can be bad if you find the wrong person, you get
I think that's
married to the wrong person. Yeah. Perhaps these people are just going off poor examples that they've been given. But that's not going to be the rule.
Well, marriage is a risk, isn't it? It's just
everything's a risk.
Everything's a risk. You could end up in that situation very easily if you're with someone lazy who's not respecting you. But you could equally end up in a situation that's so meaningful, and you could do this montage of amazing moments in a marriage, equally the same. It just depends who you end up with.
Exactly. I mean, these people are taking the exceptions and turning them into the rule. Whereas, like you say, there are going to be some people who will have a marriage that's not going to work out for them, but they're going to be a smaller percentage than those who are mainly just going to end up in a marriage and relationship that's like most of them, which is that, you're not fairy tale, Prince Charming into the sunset for the rest of your life, but it's something meaningful and stable that gives you something, gives you a rock to hold on to.
I think marriage requires a degree of practicality, and the fairy tales that are so widespread in society, they tend to create unrealistic expectations. When these expectations are not met, many people think that, this is not going right, and they're not fighting for it.
Yeah. Well, it's like the self-expressive marriage. They think that marriage is there to fulfill their desires and their personal ambitions and everything. And sometimes, a partner will get in the way of your own self-expression and your own desires because things happen. People get ill, or there's a rough patch in your marriage. And I think now we're being told, as soon as it threatens your personhood or your personal fulfillment, then leave, which is really sad.
Yeah, and it's not something that's just exclusive to women either. Men, especially if you've got kids, you're going to have to put aside a lot that you probably would have wanted to do in your life anyway, so that you can hunker down, earn the money, and supply for your family. Women can also help with that, but at the end of the day, it is mostly true that women will be the ones doing a lot of the child rearing. So if you want to have a good division of labor, then the man's going to be the one who's doing most of the labor outside of the home. Because you've got to split that thing. That to be fair, the man can't just then come home and do nothing all day. And sit in his ass like Homer Simpson. But at the end of the day, you've got to split these things relatively evenly, especially if you don't want to have resentments built up. Otherwise, you've got to be smart about these things. You can't expect the fairy tale. You also can't expect the nightmare. You've got to be realistic, because we live in the real world, guys, and nothing's ever perfect. But don't base it off of some random TikTok that you found on there that confirms your stupid biases because you're an idiot. And I did have some people coping in this and responding to it, just saying that, most single women are actually way happier than all married women, and sent me this as a response, which was that why so many single women without children are happy. And I thought I'd just take a look at this to examine some of the data that's in here. This is from Wendy L. Patrick, who's some JD and PhD. I looked into her, and she's some kind of criminal prosecution or criminal psychologist or something. She's someone who obviously has the kind of job and career that is really interesting and engaging on a day-to-day basis. That means that, you've probably got enough on your plate day-to-day that you are engaged all the time and don't have to worry about these things. So maybe it does work out for some women. But once again, let's see what data we've got in here. So she's saying that women tend to have stronger social networks outside of their romantic relationships compared to men. This is true. Everybody knows that there is the problem, especially Connor, Charlie, and I covered it yesterday, of male loneliness. A lot of men are very, very socially isolated because we have the understanding that the abstract forces of nature don't really care about us for the most part. There's that famous Nora Vincent book where she dressed as a man for a year to get an experience of what it was like. And she realized that, hold up, nobody cares about men on a day-to-day interpersonal basis unless you have a strong group of other men who you are close with around you. Nobody cares about you. You're just dirt on the street that most people pass by. So that is true. She also says single women may be more selective than single men when choosing a partner, as they may enjoy their freedom. This is also kind of true. But once again, this isn't proving to me that women are better off without marriage. This is proving to me that women deal better
they cope with being single.
Because, single women maybe are more selective. Obviously they are, because a lot of men find themselves in a situation, I've seen it happen, beggars can't be choosers. Sometimes, no offense to the guys out there, but a lot of people see themselves in that situation. I've seen men go out with people who have been absolutely terrible for them, purely off the basis of, well, I don't know if I'm not with her, if I'm going to get with anybody else, or if anybody else is going to treat me the same way that she does.
That's the road to hell.
Exactly,
Because you're together not because you like the other person, but due to insecurity.
And if you don't have friends, if you don't have a solid social network, then you are going to just stick with someone because you're going to think it's the only place I can get any kind of comfort from someone. So I can see why, especially lonely men would be more drawn to just picking whoever.
It can happen, sadly. According to happiness expert Paul Dolan, we've got experts on happiness now, guys. What we've been able to do, we've been able to take the abstract knowledge of happiness being something out there in the abstract, and we've quantified it down to the scientific measurements of happiness.
That's utilitarianism.
Yeah, we've got a unit of joy. How many joy do you have today?
I have more than you.
You probably do. You're such a chirpy guy as well.
Very joyous.
There you go. See, he's just so happy. That's what sunshine by the sea in the Mediterranean will do to you. Such a happy guy. But Paul Dolan, who's a professor of behavioral science at the London School of Economics, said that women who are single and with no children are the happiest in the entire world. Dolan explains that while men derive benefits from marriage, the same cannot generally be said for women. Women tend to be more involved with social networks as compared to men, who often rely strongly on their wives. In other words, once again, just a reaffirmation there that women are better at coping outside of marriage. Also, that idea that women don't derive the same benefits as men from marriage might be true in some cases, but you can't just take it as just point wrote for blank that all relationships everywhere are going to end up that way. And once again, like you say, it's utilitarianism. If you're basing everything off of the pure pursuit of happiness as this abstract concept, you're never going to be happy. And also, you're going to end up with a civilization that destroys itself. Because if we all just focus every pursuit that we have in our lives on the individual pursuit of happiness, that basically being obtaining pleasure in the moment, we're going to end up with the horrible dystopian transhuman future where everybody is in the coom pod, just having, as Carl has described before, wearing the helmets where they're in virtual reality, orgasming 24/7 while civilization crumbles around them. I know that's a somewhat vulgar image, but that's what it all comes down to.
It's like Brave New World, Huxley, the pursuit of pleasure and desire. But I also think marriage is not really about happiness. Happiness is like the byproduct of marriage, but marriage is more about unity and having someone to do life with. Like, I don't think thinking of marriage as a source of happiness is a good thing. Obviously, your partner has to make you happy. You know, you shouldn't be in a relationship where you're constantly sad and lonely, but happiness shouldn't be the ultimate goal of marriage.
And when you aim for happiness, it usually doesn't
when you
come. When you don't stop aiming for it, it comes.
You're right. Happiness is a kind of a byproduct that you stumble onto in pursuing, once again, in an Aristotelian manner. If you pursue the things that you know a good life consists of, then happiness and contentment will be a byproduct of that. Whereas marriage in general should be a stable basis for forming a family, for having children, and doing those things that will continue a society on. That's what it's for. You can have your life. You can still pursue things that are Nietzschean and life-affirming as well. But generally, if you want to live in a society that's stable and presents you with the boundaries that are necessary to pursue happiness elsewhere, you need something solid to base all of that on. And I decided to take a look at these sources that the article uses, because I was like, okay, Paul Dolan, I've never heard of him. He's a happiness expert. I don't know how you get that qualification. Do you just become is it like becoming a tickle expert?
Sounds like a motivational speaker.
It really does.
Unless you have an audience and assemble them, say, be happy. Say yes to happiness.
So this is the article.
No to misery.
This is the article that they were citing here from The Independent. And it says in here that, so Mr. Dolan has his latest book, Happy Ever After, which cites evidence from the American Time Use Survey, which compared levels of pleasure and unhappiness in unmarried, married, divorced and separated and widowed individuals. Study discovered levels of happiness reported by those who were married was higher than those who do not have spouses, but only when their husband or wife was in the room. And this all seems very, very tangential and a little bit spurious, if you ask me. I'm sure that the people who take these surveys do a good job. I looked at the American Time Use Survey, and it seemed to be a part of the Bureau of Labor in America or something. Most of their job seems to be getting surveys on how people spend their time over the phone. So you just ring somebody up. How are you spending your time? You've agreed to do the survey. Also, how happy are you? Is your husband or your wife out of the room? You can be honest with me now. Don't worry about it. Seems very strange that this is the kind of information that you're going for. And once again, as we've already discussed, everything to do with the happiness. And once again, these surveys, they're conducted of limited numbers of people. You can't control for whatever else is going on in their life at that particular time anyway, if they're going through a rough patch or whatever. Mr. Dolan also said that having children can be harmful to people's well-being. And there we go. I think that's kind of the base point of where a lot of this leads to, which is that if you do things that are good for society, they're not good for you, though.
Yes, it's all about you, isn't it? It's all about the self. Obviously, there are going to be times when your child is not good for your well-being, like they're not good for your individual happiness. But the whole point is that all of these things that you think are going to make you happy, usually it's the things that you don't expect to make you happy that actually do, like the sacrifice and the compromise. That usually makes you happy in a way that you never thought it would. Happiness is usually not where you think it's going to be.
Exactly. And also, I just noted this down here, as scientists make shocking discovery that having children is difficult.
Yeah.
Nobody had ever heard of this before. I'm glad that we live in the 21st century where we can make these groundbreaking discoveries. And also,
they get money, taxpayers' money to do these studies.
Yes, they do. And so my only solution is that we all need to start listening to Mia Khalifa on her advice on what will make us all happy instead. I forgot to mention as well, in that video earlier, she was smoking a spliff, just smoking weed, just like stoned out of her brain, performatively putting
adds to
on
the
this,
credibility.
Yeah, that when I think, who am I going to take my life advice on? I think the crack addict in the corner of the street, and I think he's got something going on. I don't mean to gesture in your direction. I know you're not a crack addict. And there was another article they went to, which seems to have deloaded. So if you wouldn't mind loading that for me, John, thank you very much. Where the information that they gave was just once again reaffirming what elsewhere, that women are happier than men when they're single. This is not telling me that men and women shouldn't get married. This is just saying that women have better friendship groups around them when they're single. Everybody knows this. And none of this data can explain this, the happiness paradox, which I explained earlier, which is that as women's rights have become more and more extensive, as they've gained more and more freedoms civically, their self-reported happiness seems to have gone down and down and down. So once again, I mean, this may not even be necessarily accurate, because this again is self-reporting, and you don't know what else.
It's from The Guardion.
Well, no, this is something that's not just The Guardion. It's lots of people. It's just The Guardion had the first article that showed up on Google. Yeah, but they've pointed this out. Everybody points this out. So which data am I going to go for? And am I going to base all of my decisions purely off of what's going to make me happy? Or am I going to make my decisions based off of something that's less expedient than that, and something that's more to do with, maintaining civilization around me and what I know is going to bring more meaning into my life? I think that's something that we should do. Is there anything else that you guys would like to discuss about this before we carry on?
Well, I just think with self-report, some people would say they're happy. If they're not happy, they will still self-report being happy to try and, how do we know people are being honest with the people surveying?
How do we know they're being honest with themselves?
Exactly.
After a certain point, are you just saying that you're happy right now because you're trying to convince yourself?
Yeah, it might be that the men are being more honest about being unhappy, single. We don't know. It's just so subjective.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content that's on the site, such as the Brokenomics series, this episode on how to free your mind. If you'd like to find out what else is being put out, you can follow on Getter at lotuseaters_com on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.